Evening. Welcome to the American Dream. This week we're going to talk about the upcoming election on November 8th, 2016. We have two former members of the Lynn School Committee, Rick Starboard, who is a Republican, and Charlie Gallo, who is a Democrat. This is not going to be a brawl. This is just going to be a fun, informative program, we hope. So, Rick, what have you been doing since you left the school committee?
I've gotten more involved with the Chamber of Commerce. I've been a member for years, but I got on their board of directors, took on the role as co-chair of the Economic and Workforce Development Subcommittee. The mayor appointed me to the EDIC board, so there's kind of a good bridge there.
Good. Yeah.
I'm pretty involved with my industry. I serve on board positions in my local and national trade associations. I serve as a member of the Auto Damage Appraisers Licensing Board in Boston. I was appointed to that shortly after Governor Baker was elected. So I'm keeping pretty busy.
Good.
Various boards.
You were on the school committee for 6 years?
Yes, 3 terms.
Charlie, what about you? What have you been doing since you left the school committee?
So thank you for having me, Jim. Professionally, I'm an attorney. I have an office, Gallo Law Office here in Lynn, and left the school committee after 2 terms to focus more on that. So professionally, have been focusing more on my practice. In the community, joined a couple of nonprofit boards. One is Arts After Hours, which puts on a lot of great art and performances in the downtown, and the other one is the Lynn Business Ed Foundation, so staying with the schools and helping to support them through that.
Great. So Lynn, I say this often on this show and other places that I go. Lynn has great resources. We all know about Lynn Woods, and we all know about Lynn Beach. What about the volunteers? Like you guys are just talking with the positions that you're involved in, you're volunteers. Lynn has a tremendous number of volunteers, and it's a great strength and resource for the city. So let me start with this. They're talking about the millennium generation, and everybody seems to be saying that they're tuned out, that they're not going to vote. That usually millennium, I think they go from 18 to 35, and usually young people don't vote as often as the rest of us. But they're talking about this year, they're especially tuned out. They like, I guess their favorite candidate was Bernie Sanders. I have a theory, and I want to talk to you. You two are the perfect two to talk about it. There doesn't seem to be enough history classes and civics courses in school. And so they don't seem to have the same burning interest that some of us have for elections and for our institutions, the Supreme Court, the presidency, the Congress. What do you think about that?
So I think, and speaking, so I guess I technically am a millennial, I'm 33. I got my start because Salvi Miliaccio, who was the council president when I was 8 years old, his son was and remains one of my best friends. He would take me out to hold signs for him as a kid and got involved in that way. I know when we were on the school committee, we worked to bring in students, not just Student Government Day, but we also had students who formed sort of a council, and we both supported that. Brendan Crichton and Dan Cahill on the council side supported that, and we were exposing students at a young age to politics through that effort. I think at some of the schools, Lynn Classical, for example, they have teachers who teach civics and history as you may know, give extra credit or at least an assignment to work on local campaigns. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but I would agree with you that we should do as much as we can.
This is a national problem.
Yeah,
I'm talking about.
I think Lynn itself has done a good job. To Charlie's point, the stuff that goes on within the schools, the Skills USA program at Lynn Tech, then these kids are involved in all kinds of civic engagement and working in the community. You look at some of the young people. One that comes to mind is Jamie Figueroa.
Oh yeah,
right.
He jumps right in to different campaigns and different causes, and he's there as a young person. I met him down at the museum at an event the other night, and he had a friend there who's a student at Salem State, and he talked about how he wanted to be involved in the political scene in Lynn. So I think Lynn has done a decent job. I think you're right, though. Nationally, a lot of kids have just tuned out to
Right.
it.
Is it fair to say that the two of you would tell young people to get involved in campaigns, local,
absolutely.
national, or whatever? Yeah.
I certainly would.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I've made a lot of friends in campaigns over the years.
Yeah. And you know something? Again, coming back to Lynn, when you think about recently how many young people, including Charlie, Brendan, Dan, have entered into races and successfully.
Right.
And so I think a lot of the youth see, they see that and want to become involved in it.
So let's go to the big one. Who wants to go first?
Can we get a do-over?
Go ahead, Charlie. What do you think about the national election, the presidency?
Okay, so that's the big question. I think this presidential campaign is really one for the books, and you have someone who is coming, I don't want to say out of left field, but somebody who's not a conventional politician per se, who's running for office and doing things a lot differently, and that would be polite. I think, moreover, he's doing things in a lot of ways that are offensive to a point that we've not in certainly decades seen in this country. And so you have people who are really passionate about it and maybe on one side or the other, but you also have people who I think are disenfranchised as a result of the message and want no part of it. And I can certainly understand that. That's not me, but I certainly understand where folks who are just disgusted with the process are coming from as a result of some of this on the national level.
Okay. Rick.
I'm disgusted with the process on both sides. But to Charlie's point, where you have a candidate come out and he's starting to hit the hot topics that resonate with a lot of people, with immigration and losing jobs and all that. So a lot of America, resonates with those positions, and they latched on. And then on the other hand, you had the Republican Party entered 16 candidates.
Yeah.
And so you've got 16, for the most part, politicians over here, and you have this guy over here. So I think to him it was like shooting fish in a barrel, and that's what allowed him to be the one.
The nominee. Okay. So he has a lot of views that are controversial, and they sometimes change. I think, and I don't want to pick on any candidate. I mean, I love Hillary Clinton, but I think what Donald Trump is doing is he's hurting the institutions that I spoke about earlier. When he talks about a rigged election, I mean, we can all talk about that, but I'm a lawyer, and the Republican lawyers, there were 10 of them, they did a study over 10 years. How many fraudulent votes have been cast in the United States? And they found 11 votes in 10 years. There have been other studies, and they're minuscule. I mean, I work in elections all the time, and I never see the fraud. So I think it does a disservice to all of us to denigrate the American voter system. So what do you got to say about that? You go ahead. You can respond to that.
I think first and foremost, I'm a huge proponent of voter ID. You can't walk into any place without having to show some form of an ID. That should be first and foremost. You come in to cast your vote, you should at minimum show an ID. And I think that will eliminate a lot of the perception that people have about rigged elections or voter fraud. I've seen stories where there's been, whether it's undocumented immigrants voting, people voting in place of folks that aren't voting and they know aren't voting, whether in nursing homes or incapacitated. And I just think if they went to a voter ID system, it would help alleviate some of that, whether it's perceptual or actual. I think it's something that we need to have.
Okay, so since there isn't really much voter fraud, so you're talking mainly about perception, because there really isn't in this country.
I mean, if you Google it, you'll see, left-written articles will say it's really not that big of a deal. Right-written articles will say that they are.
Yeah, but what's the reality, though? Is there voter fraud? And if there isn't, I mean, then there is a problem with requiring people to have licenses, because some people, they can't drive. Some people aren't eligible to drive. And some people, there are a lot of poor people in this country who cannot afford to get a license or a voter ID. And in some states, in the South in particular, they really make it hard for people. It goes back to the 1920s when you had to do a literacy test and all of that and pay a poll tax. And it was designed to keep black people out, and now Hispanics.
Don't you need to have an ID to register to vote?
No, I don't think so.
Then I think that's a problem too. I don't remember the day that back when I turned 18 and I went to register to vote, but I would have imagined that I would have had to have shown some type of identification the day I registered to say who I was.
All right, so that's an area that we disagree on, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, 2 points. So the first one, I think, and maybe the root of your question, Jim, may be the talk about rigged elections and election fraud from Mr. Trump, who's, I think, setting up himself for failure and really setting expectations low. He loses the election, and before then he set expectations so low in the American system that it becomes easier then to challenge that election. I don't think it's undemocratic to challenge an election result. We've had recounts, court hearings, and,
I've done it, yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. You got to keep the integrity of the process, but I think you do it afterwards, not at the start. Rick, was a pleasure to serve with Rick on the school committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. We're friends. We don't agree on everything, that's for sure. But on the second point, the ID, I would probably differ, and that's because there may be voter fraud, and we don't know. But I think a bigger issue is that folks aren't coming out to vote, and we talk about fraud and people voting when they're not supposed to. To me, there's more people who ought to be voting and aren't getting to the polls. And so to me, we probably want to make it easier for people to vote as opposed to harder. You'd be surprised. So I work as a lawyer. I represent a lot of senior citizens. You'd be surprised how many people don't have IDs because they don't have to drive. They have gray hair, or like myself, no hair, and so there's no need for an ID at the liquor store, convenience store, or restaurant. So to me, we should be going in the other direction. But I appreciate and agree with I think the bottom line that Rick made, which is we need to make sure our elections are fair.
Well, my contention is they are fair. So
how do you know if
because
those checks and balances don't exist?
Because there have been a lot of studies made of national elections all across the country, and nobody finds any fraud.
And they're good at it.
How would you rig an election? I mean, we have in this city Mary Audley, who's just a fantastic person, very smart. She knows her job. She's got a great staff. Does anybody? First of all, how would you rig elections all across the country?
I believe that voter fraud exists. I don't think it's as rampant as some people may think. But to rig an election, to basically say that there's a concerted effort nationally to, I don't believe that.
Yeah. So let's move. But what that claim does is it's discouraging people, I think, in some cases, from voting. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the turnout is and where the turnout comes from.
But do you really think that? Do you think that by one candidate saying, they're gonna, it's gonna be rigged against me anyway, that's gonna...
Absolutely. People are very cynical about politics. All those politicians, they're all the same. I'm sure you've heard that.
I think it's setting himself up so that if he loses, and crazier things have happened, but the polls certainly are in Hillary's, look like Hillary is going to win poll-wise at this point.
It does.
Right.
But he's setting himself up where, if he loses, he's undermined the system from the beginning. And so it becomes then easier to challenge, at least for his supporters. They're going in brainwashed to think that the system's against them. And that's not to Rick, and that's not to Republicans and Lynn, because there are a lot of good ones. There's Rick, there's John Kroll, there's Rick Wood, and
three.
Bill Cooksey. There's but there's a lot of friends, and I say this as somebody who's supported Bernie and who's a liberal Dem.
I get it. Yeah.
That there are good people here, but
Of course,
unfortunately,
all across the country.
Yep,
All across the country.
that
yeah.
particular campaign is not reflective of it.
No, but I don't want to keep picking on him.
No.
I just want to talk about what's happening
And
in
I
the
think,
country.
given the choice, as I said, can we get a do-over? I think the folks that he mentioned would all agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a
So-
candidate choice, certainly not mine.
But apparently, I agree. It looks like Mrs. Clinton is going to win this race. And it looks like she's now having an effect on what they call down ballot elections. People running for United States Senator and people running for United States Congress.
See it in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
New Hampshire is a good example. So if you're discouraged by your candidate, you don't think he's going to win anyway, would that keep you home? And therefore, people on the lower ballot aren't going to get your vote. I mean, I think there's a real chance of that happening. Let me ask you this. Do you think the Democrats will take back the United States Senate?
It's beginning to look that way. Actually, that could just come down to New Hampshire.
Yeah, it could.
That AR race.
Right.
And for what was a dead heat is now heavily in Maggie Hassan's favor.
Okay. So what do you think? You think?
No, I think that's right, and it's looking certainly like it's going to be a Democratic win, probably across the board, and again, depending on that race and a couple of others, Indiana. I think now you're seeing Republicans who realize that they're damaged by the Trump campaign, and they're saying now Hillary's going to win, you need to elect us to be the balance, to be a check and balance. And
Right.
so that's the argument, excuse me, I saw on I think MSNBC this weekend that folks were
Do you think
were
it's
making.
working?
I don't know yet. It's early in terms to switch gears like that. I think we need another week to see what happens.
Historically, more people vote during presidential elections. Some people who don't normally vote, they call it the real election for whatever reason. Well, they don't understand the importance of congressmen and women and senators. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see the turnout in those areas where people don't turn out for Republicans because they're turned off by the national ticket. What about Hillary Clinton? You haven't said anything about her.
I think, to me it's exciting, certainly to have somebody, potentially the first female president. I think that, and I wasn't a Hillary supporter at the beginning, and it took me a long time to get there. But I think in terms of, having a competent president, having somebody who's going to know the job, there are probably few, if any, candidates who have had the experience that she's had from as a first lady, as a senator, as secretary of state, and having run for president once before. That she's really uniquely qualified, I think, and she is not, I think, a far left liberal or anything like that. So it's a bit perplexing, I think, that the level of vitriol that exists against her.
Well, when President Clinton got elected in 1992, someone said to me, "I hate Hillary Clinton. I hate Hillary Clinton." And I was surprised. I barely know who she was. And I said, "Give me 3 reasons why you hate Hillary Clinton." And he couldn't give me any. And then I found out later she was getting killed on the talk radio show, because she had been a lawyer for disadvantaged kids and disabled kids. And she was perceived at that time as a liberal. So, but a lot of the attacks against her have been, in my view, have had no validity. People who know her say she's a very nice person. I met her one time. She seemed extremely nice to me. She's a problem solver. I mean, she'll come up, you name the problem, and she'll come up with a solution. It may not get adopted, but she certainly will try. So, that's my take. What do you think, Rick?
Never been a fan
Yeah.
of neither one of them, really.
Yeah.
I think my personal opinion is versus being there for the public good, it's self-serving interest. And I think when you follow, whether it's their foundation across the world in different countries, even down in Haiti, you know, you can say, well, you know, it's just people spreading rumors. You know, there's truth to something, and the stuff that goes on with those two, I just never been a fan.
Okay. So we're not going to build Hillary here. But fortunately, she doesn't need us.
Well, and I think
Well, out of the gate, I mean, Massachusetts being what Massachusetts
Right,
is,
right, right.
It could be anybody, and that's the way that it's going to fall out.
What were we going to say, Charlie?
I was just going to say, and that's you know, I don't necessarily agree again, but that's a fair. At least you have some basis for it. I think that the idea.
Well, what's the basis?
Well, I think you can speak for yourself, but I think that you know, you have concerns about the foundation, you said, and personal interest, and I don't agree with that. But at least there's some basis. What bothers me is when people are criticizing her without any basis, and it begins to
Of
look,
course.
you know,
Yeah.
sexist, really, in many instances, and you know, personal in many instances as well. And that's not what we're seeing here.
I haven't heard anybody attacking the fact that she's a woman or being the first
No,
woman.
no, neither have I. Although I think it's certainly hurt her over the years. I mean, you can ask any woman in the United States if they've ever felt that they've been discriminated
Yep.
against because they were a woman.
Yep.
And I think you'll get a fair amount of people who would say yes to that. And I think certainly she. Look, the Declaration of Independence said all men are created equal. What's wrong with that? It meant men, and it meant only men who owned property. So it didn't include the rest of us. It didn't include black people at all, and it didn't include women. So gradually over the years, we're getting to the point where women got recognition, but it was a real struggle and a real fight. In fact, we won't have won that fight, I think, until this year. I mean, imagine we've had, I don't know how many presidents have we had, 32 or something, and they've all been men. Why?
And the right to vote, which is really the basis
Right.
of it all.
Right.
You look back, it's been, you know, roughly 100 years only that females have had the right to vote.
Right.
Certainly in Massachusetts, originally you had to be a male property owner, 21 years of age or older,
Right.
to vote. And so I think that problem is at the heart, unfortunately, of our democracy.
Right, except it's an improving democracy all the time. So I'm not one of those cynics who thinks we're in deep trouble. I think we're in great shape.
Well, I mean, when you look at even the candidates, with first president of
Yeah.
you know, African American heritage,
Right.
We had, you know, at least two candidates with Latino heritage. I know Marco Rubio with Cuban, Ted Cruz, I forget where.
Right.
So they are there, and they're serving in bigger numbers,
Right.
and you know, throughout Congress, throughout the nation, in local roles as mayors, as governors, as congressmen, senators,
Right.
and you see that increasing year after year. So it's not surprising that, you know, you're about to see the first woman, you know, and it won't be
Right.
long before you see the first Latino American.
I agree with that, too. The Republicans, after the election 4 years ago, came up with a prescription for improving the Republican Party in its opportunity to get elected president. And three main parts of that prescription were involve more women, involve more Latinos, and involve more African Americans. How do you think they've done?
The problem, you know, most of the names that Charlie read off, including myself, as being Republicans in Lynn, would probably be hung in other parts of the country, because the Republican Party continues to be hung up on social issues that that by and large women and minorities don't attach themselves
Right,
to.
right.
And that's a huge problem with the Republican Party.
How do you solve that problem? I believe it or not, I want to see the Republican Party succeed. I don't want to ever see a one-party country. And,
I'm a practicing Christian, but I don't believe in the social beliefs that, you know, a good percentage of the Republican Party believes in.
So how do the Republicans get together? The Democrats seem to be more together. I mean, more unified, and
I don't know.
that's
Your
a
answer's as
real
good as mine.
it's really a serious problem that's got to be examined after this election.
You know, if they want to keep holding on to those beliefs and not adapt. I mean, many of us have had different beliefs, but you change over time. You know, when you have
I
an
have
unwillingness
also,
to
yeah.
change, then you're eventually going to fall off because you fail to evolve.
Okay, so we never got around. We got 1 minute left. Do you have anything else that you want to say?
I think this has been a good discussion. I guess the last thing I would say is not too political, just that it's an honor to be here, that Jim and Rick both are giants in this community, both have served in public office, both have given so much time and money to causes here that hopefully folks that are listening and watching have enjoyed it, and just know you have a couple of good guys here, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a great experience being here.
Good.
You know, I got the call. I thought maybe it was going to be beat up the
No,
Republican
no,
Day, but
I don't do that to anybody.
But you know, working with Charlie for 4 years, sitting right next to him, you know, at all the school committee meetings, you know, we had a lot of fun together, working
Okay.
together. And
Just
I think
a
we
quick-
accomplished a lot of good things.
A quick ad, early voting starts Monday, October 24th. So you have 2 weeks before the election to vote. You can come down to City Hall and get a ballot and cast your ballot at your leisure. It will take away the pressure from you as a voter to having to wait in a line on election day. And it will take some of the heat off the election commission. So I strongly encourage you to vote early. And as a Democrat, I strongly encourage you to vote often.
Show your ID. And the ballot questions.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know, this